Good morning, Anthony. How are you?
Good morning, Don. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. We have you again here as our expert talking about how real life compares to movies and things. And we've got a new nickname for you.
Yes,
Mr. Hollywood,
we
man.
established me as Mr. Hollywood in the office. I think it's because I watch too much TV, but it's sticking apparently.
I think it's really because you're got a great analysis on all these things. I never knew that about you, and I love it, man. So today we are going to talk about a podcast and then a TV show thing that was on Netflix called Dirty John. Dirty John is something that caught my imagination.
Right.
As you know, I used to be a police officer and a DA in Orange County.
Right.
And I'd never heard of this situation. I'm far removed from there, living here in Pasadena. But my wife and I were watching TV, and we were looking for something to do, and we saw this Dirty John episode. Somebody had mentioned that it was good.
Right.
Turned it on, and it was like, holy cow, man, that's like a flashback of where I came from.
Right.
In fact, the beginning of the podcast here, because I'd listened to both the podcast, and then I watched the television and then listened to the podcast. But my good friend Matt Murphy was the prosecutor down there, and he's in this, and I felt very like touched and connected some way to all this. I don't know about you. Do you have any experience in Orange County?
I've gone down there for a couple hearings before. I don't have much experience. I know I had a couple friends that live it there. It's a different kind of a world that they live in. It's a kind of a little bubble compared to what we are here over in
it's like this
Los
iron
Angeles,
curtain between LA and Orange County.
Right.
It's weird, but when I lived in Orange County, I always thought, what is on the other side there? LA is this big, gnarly, polluted, city that you don't want to go. It's violent. It's dangerous. Then I moved out here, and it's like, wait, this is a beautiful place, man. Orange County people don't know about this.
Exactly.
And conversely, LA people think the Orange County people that the streets are lined in gold, and it's just, and I mean, it really is a very pretty place to live, and it's nice and everything, but the perceptions are so off. With respect to the Orange County, in this podcast and then in the movie, you hear them talking about things like, I'm going to the Spectrum, or I'm in Newport Beach, and all these like local places
the
that you wonder,
right?
and you wonder like, if I'm watching this like in New York, or Arkansas or something like that, and they're making reference to all these places, is California that popular where everybody knows what they're talking about?
Exactly.
But anyways, I found this to be an extremely good portrayal of a scary incident, of something that really happened. This is real life,
right?
And you and I thought that this would be good to talk about.
Yeah. So this one's unique in that this is a real life story. It was originally investigated by an LA Times journalist, and there was a podcast series called Dirty John. Unlike you, I listened to the podcast first, and then I watched the series of the adaptation that they put onto screen. And I thought they were both great. They each have their own kind of charms to them.
Yeah.
I love the way that they kind of took the characters and kind of reimagined them as to what you would kind of imagine what their vision would be like. But this is a great topic for us to discuss because there's a lot of family law issues in it.
And we'll get into that. What we're going to do is again, spoiler alert, if you're viewing, listening to this podcast, what we want to let you know is we're going to go through from beginning to end.
Right.
So
both the podcast and the Netflix show. And the movie. Apparently there's a movie as well. So
that's right. That's right.
I didn't catch that one though, but that's on my list.
Yeah. Also, if you go on YouTube, by the way, you can just Google or search for this series or whatever it is, and you'll see the real life people being interviewed on talk shows and stuff like that. It's fascinating. So let's talk first of all. Let's set this thing up, okay? And I think that for me, what I'd like to do is let's go with the TV thing because we could talk about the actors and stuff. So who are the people that portrayed the real life characters here?
Yeah, so we have Eric Bana, who was great as John Meehan. He's the central, villain in the entire story, and he really is a villain, a real life villain in it. And Connie Britton, who is his, now estranged widow, who had to kind of suffer through his torment, and their two children, who were Tara and I believe Michael and one more Veronica.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I looked at the actor of Eric Bana, that guy really knows how to play a mean dude.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I guess he's from Australia.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Okay.
And man, has he got it. I mean, there's certain parts in there when he's like his eyes turn dark.
Yeah.
And he puts the fear in you just watching it and
Right.
stuff. Interestingly, I don't find him to be very similar to the actual guy because I
Right.
got a picture of the actual guy here who's kind of, to me, looks like a meathead.
Yeah, so the way that they described it on the podcast was he was kind of like this big, meaty kind of football player type of build guy. And Eric Bana doesn't necessarily fit that, but the way that Eric Bana initially came onto the show and just seemed like a regular kind of nice, friendly guy, and then you see the transition of him into this kind of crazy and psychopathic is probably the best way to describe it type of person.
Yeah.
The way that he portrayed it was just absolutely amazing. I think.
Yeah. And then the woman who plays the is it Connie?
Debbie.
Yeah. Debbie. Okay.
Deborah, short Debbie for short. Yeah.
Okay. I found that the actress there also did a really, really good job.
was great.
And she portrayed that really kind of like innocent woman who is just going through life, and she, things aren't always great for her. I mean, she's been divorced like 4 times.
4 times.
But she's got 2 beautiful kids. She's a successful woman.
Mm-hmm.
What does she do for a living?
I think she owns a furniture and interior design company.
Yeah, and apparently, I know this is switching to the podcast, is that it sounds like she was really novel in the way that she marketed it and her approach and everything.
Right.
Yeah, and so she's a successful woman, about 59 years old.
Right.
She's been divorced, I think it's 4 times.
Yeah.
And 2 wonderful kids, girls. One of them is definitely an adult. I'm not sure from watching this whether the youngest one I guess she just graduated high school or she's graduating high school, but she's the baby of the family.
That's right.
And she's so successful that she lives in the community of Newport Beach, or that area over there.
Which is pretty fancy to begin with. And not only that, she's on the shoreline in that apartment that basically overlooks the ocean too, which is probably our version of Malibu or having one of those cliffside homes.
Right. So, somebody that's been divorced 4 times, I would hope that she would learn her lesson about how to pick them, right? And stuff. But we're human.
Sure.
People tend to make similar mistakes over and over again. Mm-hmm. And this story starts off with her meeting somebody online, right?
That's right.
Actually, it starts off with her meeting several people, but then coming across this man who's John Meehan.
Right,
so
exactly.
Talk to me about that first encounter.
So you see actually on the Netflix show that she's kind of gone out on a string of dates, and they're just not very exciting. And here comes a guy that seems to be open and genuinely interested in her. And you could totally see from her perspective after being divorced 4 times that she's just looking for someone to acknowledge her and acknowledge her interest and keep the focus on her. So that's definitely attractive. And unfortunately, that's what let kind of a trickster into the entire picture, is that willingness to be open and trusting.
Right.
Yeah.
So they have a nice evening. I don't know, I don't recall exactly what the conversation was over dinner, but somehow they make it back to her apartment.
That's right. Yeah.
And then they're in the apartment and something significant happens. What's that?
He has a little bit of trouble leaving, and it doesn't really take no for an answer. And,
right.
It starts off a little bit awkward to begin with, and I think that's kind of a good indicator of like some bad things that are coming, but she decides to let that go, and we find out that she actually lets a lot of things go.
Yeah.
You can try to logic and reason with people, but ultimately the heart's going to win out. And that's what we see here.
It shouldn't. I got to tell you that. One thing that I learned in life is that when you're talking about relationships, you've got to be paying attention to the red flags.
Oh, yeah.
And she wasn't paying attention to them
she absolutely
right from the beginning.
Was not, no.
He came in and he was dressed poorly, right? He's wearing kind of like
I think he was homeless, right, at that time.
Well, what we later learned is that he'd been out of the Orange County jail for 2 days.
That's right.
And he was practically homeless. I think he had some kind of a trailer out in the desert or something. But he comes waltzing in there, and he's kind of disheveled.
Yep.
But he's a handsome guy.
Right.
And he's tall and stuff. And then the second thing is that he lays down on her bed.
Yeah.
And he's not moving anywhere. And she's like,
He really thought he was going to spend the night there, I guess.
Yeah. And, he can't take a hint.
Right.
So, I mean, she has to get kind of forceful with him. And then he kind of throws a little tantrum, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
Leaves.
Right.
And she's going, whoa, man, I'm glad I'm got out of that one. So she goes to work the next day, and what happens?
He calls her back and sets up a second date, right?
Yeah. Well, he apologizes profusely.
Right.
And we see that this is kind of part of his manipulation. He has this ability of falling on his sword in a really meaningful yet, untruthful way, right?
Completely untruthful. Completely untruthful. But he has that ability, and you know, I think it's just a kind of a character quirk that he can appear very genuine, despite the fact that he's absolutely not genuine at all. He's
Yeah.
just a complete fraud and trickster.
Yeah. So, what does he tell her?
I think he tells her, you know, this is just not something that I am normally willing to do. I just like you so much, and that's just kind of something out of character for me. So let's just kind of start back over again and see where it goes from there.
I'm so embarrassed by what I did, but you know, it's just that was such a great evening that I just couldn't let go, you know, and I'm ashamed of it, but if you would just give me one more chance.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly.
So she's talking to her people at her work, and she owns the place because she owns her own company, and she gives them a second chance.
Yep.
Right. And so they start dating, and very soon thereafter, her daughters start meeting this guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And could you describe the first encounter when I think it was the oldest daughter that met him first?
Right. I think he shows up and he's just kind of wearing shorts, and she's dressed out to go like to a fancy dinner. And they probably thought, well, who is this guy? Why is he dressed like this? And actually, one of the quirks that he has also is that he wears his medical scrubs around
all the
time, and they're not clean. Like, you know, normally you would think if you're working in a hospital environment, you know, you want to present as very clean.
You'd be
and
leaving
polished.
To work clean.
Exactly.
And then you come home with maybe some blood and stuff on it, right?
Exactly. But it just seems to be that way all the time. So these types of red flags start to get onto the mind of these two daughters, who are basically private investigators. The levels that they go through to try to look into this guy's background and the information they dig up on him and present to their mom. You know, I think part of her just didn't want to acknowledge that any of that was true. Her heart was just so much into it. She really felt she wanted to be wanted, and she was willing to disregard all of these red flags and eventually get married to this person, which is a complete issue in and of itself, and we can talk about that. Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed with some of the cases that we handle is that children become the protectors of parents.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and especially in a divorce situation where the kids have seen mom or dad make a series of blunders with respect to relationships, they try to intervene. They don't like it when the parent brings the child back to the house so quickly like that, and they start examining. And in this case, the parent-child relationship was reversed quite a bit, real fast.
Exactly, yeah, and that's part of something that just kind of is central to being in that type of family, where you just have this desire to protect those that you love, and you really see that from these girls, the lengths that they're willing to go to in order to try to protect their mother.
Yeah, mom had become somewhat of an errant teenager herself. I mean,
she
it
did.
Was like, she started like doing things on the sly, not telling them what she was doing with regard to Mr. Meehan. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
exactly.
Okay, so what happens then is that he moves in.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And they rent a really nice place right in the harbor of Newport Beach,
which is that's prime real estate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows what that rent would be?
I think it's something like $89,000 per year, and they paid that up front.
That's right.
So you know that she's got a good chunk of cash lying around. It's probably what triggered John to kind of be so willing to stick this through, despite the family kind of being completely against him.
Right.
So
the daughter's first encounter with Mr. Meehan, if I recall right, is that she sees him kind of like looking around the place, like, whoa, what have I just landed into? And he starts asking some questions, and she's right away, man, her red flags are going up.
Right.
And she has a conversation with mom afterwards, and mom, again, she stiff arms the daughter.
Exactly.
Right. And then he moves in. And they move into this apartment, and he becomes Mr. Wonderful, right?
Yeah.
What does he do?
He's making her smoothies. I don't know if that was a part of the podcast or not. That's something that was definitely included as a part of the Netflix show. I don't know if that actually happened, or I mean, something that he does, I guess.
I could tell you that I've read articles and stuff, and that was one of the many things he did.
Interesting.
Now, of course, it's on the show, and you see it being done every morning. And It's a different shake, and it's like wonderful. Who knows how often it was, but he did do that.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I love the way that they showed that. Every single morning is a different color, like milkshake or fruit shake. Yeah,
turns the shower water on, so
exactly.
It's just the right temperature.
Mr. Perfect, right?
Yeah. Oh my God! And so she goes, to the work, and she assumes that he's going to his work because he represents himself as what?
He is an anesthesiologist, right? And actually, I don't think he ever actually was. I think he was first a nurse anesthetist, which is, I guess, a step down. And then he apparently got into some trouble with the nursing board, too. So he's not even that anymore.
Right. This guy's from Ohio. John is from Ohio, and he had prior relationships over there.
Yep.
He's been married. He's got kids, and he gets in some big trouble over there. And we'll get into his background a little bit more, but with respect to what he represents to mom, is I'm going to work every day. That's why I got these scrubs, right?
He wasn't actually doing that.
Yeah. And when I see that, he's turning the shower water on just right. He's giving her the shakes. He's Mr. Lovey-dovey and stuff. But anybody that tries to enter into that relationship, he's a different person when she's not around. Right?
Oh, yeah. He's willing to kind of just draw like a line in the sand, be very forceful, stop getting into your mother's business. We see an altercation, I guess, a verbal dispute when he's getting into it for the daughter when she finds his diploma saying that he's a nurse anesthetist rather than an actual anesthesiologist. And he says, don't talk to your mother that way. Well, what position is he in to make that kind of a statement to someone else's child?
They've only been together for like a month or so, and he's talking like he's his father or something.
Exactly.
Right? Stopping right there, when people bring new relationships into a family, I always cringe, and I always would hope that our clients would be more tactful. Now, of course, this is a situation where these two girls were actually young ladies and stuff, but it reminds us of two things. One is that bringing new relationships in is a concern of the whole family. It's just not yours, and you got to do it delicately. What I like is when people say, "Look, I'll continue dating, but you're not meeting my kids right up front, and stuff, and you're not living with me right up front." Now that's a personal choice, but I do think that especially in this case, you took it way too fast.
It's a delicate situation, right?
Yeah,
you really have to be very tactful about the way you do it.
Yeah, you owe it to your family. And the second thing, and I'm not trying to be too critical of this poor woman because I love her to death, but the second thing is that even adult kids are impacted by divorces and subsequent relationships, and they have feelings. And I think that we owe it to our kids, whether they're little bitty kids or if they're adults and stuff, is to being tactful about these type of things. So Dirty John gets into the place, and he's living like a king. She's going to work, and he's driving around. And the oldest daughter, does what?
She engages the assistance of a private investigator, which turns out to be a little bit expensive. She sells some Chanel bags in order to pay for the costs, and that private investigator is able to dig up a lot of information about him.
Yeah. And she also puts a tracker on his car.
She did, yeah, she did.
Which doesn't really reveal too much because, interestingly enough, he was still going from hospital to hospital. I'm not sure exactly what he was doing. I don't think we ever know.
We don't actually know.
But he wasn't working during this time period.
I think there's an insinuation that he's stealing drugs or kind of using his nursing appearance to get into the hospital, get into certain restricted areas and stuff like that. But again, we don't actually know. We don't know. We know that he has a addiction to opiates that he tried to kick, but was ultimately unsuccessful in doing that.
Yeah. And that's what we learn later on is this man's a drug addict, like a really serious one, and he'd been stealing medicine from his prior workplaces when he did have the license.
And very sad that he was actually taking it from the patients that were under his care too, people that didn't have any ability to kind of speak out or understand what was going on.
Okay, so both of the kids are concerned about him. There's a nephew that's involved in this.
That's right.
And the nephew, now Debbie, is that her name, Debbie again?
Yes.
So her sister had been shot way back in the earliest by her husband. Right.
Attempted murder-suicide.
Yeah, and the nephew, who didn't really know, I guess the mom that was, because he just little, and stuff like that. He grew up being pretty close to Debbie, and initially he gives Dirty John the benefit of the doubt, but then John spooks him as well.
He's making a really just off the wall, not very normal type conversations. I think he brought up kind of like shooting someone with a gun.
Yeah.
And that's got to be another red flag. And it's crazy to see Debbie just kind of, it's just the way that he is and be willing to
Well, she bought into a lot of his lies. I mean, John was saying that he was also recently in, I think it was Iraq or Afghanistan or something. He was jumping out of, he's supposed to be a doctor. He's jumping out of planes. I couldn't understand that one.
Yeah,
and stuff.
Exactly.
And he was cut in the. I mean, these lies were just incredible, and she apparently bought it, but the family's not buying it.
No.
I mean, especially the nephew's hearing this. Man, this isn't adding up. And then it gets hostile between the two of them, right? So the nephew gets on board with the sisters, right, and they all start the investigation process. Meanwhile, Debbie's mom is there too.
That's right.
And why don't you describe her?
God bless the mom, because all she wants is for her daughter to be happy,
Yeah.
right? And she sees that she's happy with this man, and she is more concerned about, you know, what the separation is going to be for her, and we see that a lot too, where, you know, we have family members that are more concerned about the separation and the emotional toll that's going to have on their family members, rather than, you know, the bigger picture of like, is this person actually a good person to be with?
Yeah. So what I learned about the mom is she's somewhat of a gullible lady.
Yeah.
You know, she's smitten with John. She thinks he's a really nice, funny guy. She loves him.
Right.
And she loved the guy that had shot her other daughter many years ago. In fact, she had she hired a defense attorney for him, for her other son-in-law, and even testified on his behalf in court, getting him off.
That's some incredible forgiveness.
Yeah.
To be willing to do that. And there's some value to kind of cleaning your heart of all that anger and stuff like that. But that's not something I think most people would be willing to do.
So it really paints a picture of, number one, is that Debbie is kind of the support of her mother.
Right.
And Debbie might be a little bit like her mother.
Exactly.
Because we later learned that she's very forgiving of things.
And
right?
she forgives John. As she initially tries to separate from him, she moves out and gets a hotel room, I think, for a period of time.
Well, let's not get there yet, because we know that one day she takes a trip to Nevada.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And John catches up with her. And what happens in lovely Nevada?
They go to, I think in the show, it's a chapel, probably one of those get hitched quick chapels.
In real life it was too. There's a picture of them.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So they get married. Despite all the lies and despite all the red flags, she's willing to set all that aside and tie her nuptials to this man.
And when she comes back, she doesn't tell anybody. So they keep it a
not.
secret, because she knows that, again, she's kind of acting like the errant teenager.
Right.
She doesn't want anybody to know.
Right,
So
right,
the
right.
kids don't know. Her mom doesn't know. The way that people find out is because of an argument, right?
That's right.
And it was between the nephew and John, right?
Right.
And then John pipes off, well, we're married or something, right? So now the family hears about this, and they're like, unbelievable. It gets to the point where Debbie's estranged from her kids, right?
Right. Imagine hearing that, by the way, from someone that your entire family hates, right? And just to kind of jump out and tell you, oh, by the way, I married your mother. It's completely, off the wall.
Yeah. So things are moving like extremely fast, way too fast. But eventually, Debbie starts figuring things out about John by herself. I mean, she's heard it from her family, and she's estranged from her family. They don't want her coming around the grandkids and holidays and things like that. But she starts seeing things like she went through his papers. And let's talk a little bit about John's real background.
So I actually took a remote and I paused on each of the documents because I recognize them. Yeah. So we see a couple domestic violence restraining orders.
Right.
We see a revocation of his nursing license. We see a extensive criminal background, multiple felonies for intimidation.
He's sort of in prisons.
Yeah.
He's been in prisons a couple of times.
Exactly.
He was on parole.
Exactly. And he was getting letters from the prison system, probably bills for his expenses in there. And we start seeing, who John really, really is.
Yeah, and it's incredible. I mean, the guy's from Ohio. Apparently, he was married, and then he got caught having a relationship with a doctor.
Right.
And he's got a background where he was brought up by kind of a gangster type of a guy, and his whole life is training from his father is to really just fraud everybody.
A professional con artist.
But he's got a sister who loves him but is not like him, right? And he even screws up that relationship by taking advantage of her. So we're not going to get into all the nuances and stuff, but John is a really, really bad guy. He comes over here to California, and he's stalking people, right? He's ripping people off. He's doing all the nasty things, and he's basically really taking advantage of women. He's a con artist. He's one of these guys that is tall, handsome, and he could get women to fall in love with him, and he steals their money.
Right, exactly.
And he does it over and over again. So she starts looking through these papers, and she brings it to an investigator and says, what is this, right?
Right.
So, right about this time, John starts realizing that Debbie's catching him on this stuff, and he's in denial mode, right?
Sure.
And what does he tell her?
He's just basically saying, there's an explanation for everything. It's more complicated than what you think, and just kind of like twisting and turning and trying to give a whatever explanation that she'll accept. And she's eating up all of it. She actually is willing to ignore all of these red flags, and basically is willing to attach everything that he's saying as truth.
Yeah.
Which is, again, shocking to the family.
But there's a certain point where she realizes that, hey, this guy is not the person that I thought he was. I know he's not a doctor.
Right.
I know he's been in prison. He was in jail. He's getting letters from people from jail. He owns some thing way out in the desert, like a motorhome or something.
Trailer park, yeah.
He's a drug addict.
Right.
He's got blood in his toes because he's shooting up and stuff, and she's finding like his kits and stuff around the house.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a point where she realizes that he defrauded me.
Right.
He came into this relationship by fraud.
Right.
Talk about that.
So she goes to an attorney and asks, what this next step is. They talk about two things. Number one is for an annulment, and number two is for a restraining order. And she doesn't.
If she came to you, what would you say?
I would say get both.
Okay.
Get him sooner rather than later. This is a seriously deranged and dangerous individual. Do everything within your power to try to keep him away from you, which is unfortunate because she also goes to the police department and lets them know, and they eventually do start an investigation, but you find out that they're actually not really able to do anything, at least from the outset. Just because having a criminal record doesn't really mean that you're out to do something, again, it's a good indicator, but until you actually commit a crime, the police department isn't actually able to help you.
Yeah, but that family law attorney, I tell you what, when I saw that part of it,
right,
I started smelling John. I started smelling his old clothes, man, and his disgust. Because I was a cop in a rough city, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And I was patting people down and doing search warrants and with these people that are grubby, lying, cheating, guys and stuff like that. And I could just straight out of jail, and I'm like, how in the world did you continue on with that guy after learning? Because he wasn't a very organized guy. I mean, she went into his desk full of all these papers and stuff, and she's seeing that he's shooting up. And here's this like pristine lady in Newport Beach living with this guy, and I'm going, get out of this relationship. This is the time, right? I mean, you could get an annulment. You wouldn't owe him anything, right, if there was an annulment?
That's correct. So one of the things that you can do if you enter a marriage and one person is misrepresenting who they are, what their capacities are, what their income is, things like that, if that's a fraud that goes to the heart of the marriage, you can basically negate the marriage. That's what the difference.
Do you think she had grounds at that point?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
there's
think
no
she
question.
had multiple grounds to annul that marriage. And she eventually does file. File for an annulment.
Yeah.
So.
But before she does that, though, she moves to she hides. She starts wearing wigs.
Right.
She goes into a hotel somewhere near the Spectrum. She communicates with him, and then unbeknownst to her kids, because her kids thought that, hey, she's broken up the relationship. What happens?
She goes back and checks on him in the hospital and sees him lying there, and those heartstrings kind of get tugged on again, and she's willing to.
I'm sorry, baby. I didn't want to tell you what kind of a guy I am.
And the thing that I caught my attention about this is how often do we see this in domestic violence cases in which someone is abused or they're undergone harassment or stalking, but they're willing to set that all aside. Enablers, exactly. I think it's called the cycle of violence, right? Mm-hmm. That you're willing to forgive these things and go back. Oh, I'll change. Things will be different this time around. It's never different. It's always going to be the more the same, and intentionally, it's going to get to a point where it's going to really be something serious. And that's what happens here, right?
Yeah. So, she finds out all these nasty things. She could annul. She doesn't. She goes to the hospital.
Right.
She secretly gets involved with him again.
Right.
And they start living secretly, not telling the kids. At this point, it's like, man, what are you doing? Right?
Yeah.
You can't change people like that. I've been around the block a few times, and I tell clients this all the time. Look, if you think you're going to like somehow bring that guy to therapy and have, some kind of lobotomy on him, it ain't going to happen. When they're that bad, he's going to continue doing that.
Well, he was actually even resistant to kind of things that were just set her mind at peace, right? So when they go and they see the attorney and they talk about getting a post-nup just to protect each other's assets, what happens there, right? What happens to that relationship with that attorney?
What happens there was very interesting. I think
Right.
that you and I could probably relate to that. So you got two people in the room, and they're talking about a postnup. So there's a problem there.
Yep.
Number one is they both shouldn't be in that room.
They need to have their own separate attorneys.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're getting a postnup.
And I think that I'm not sure that they went there for that purpose, but they're there, and the attorney starts mentioning that. And Debbie's like, yeah, that's kind of like that would be perfect.
Right.
Then I could be with the scoundrel, but he's not going to hurt me, right?
And in that scene, you see Eric Bana's demeanor
Yeah.
change from just kind of like, a regular person, and then his eyes just start going wider and wider,
Yeah.
knowing that this is going to be something that is going to disadvantage me or hurt me, and that ultimately is going to lead to the breakdown in the relationship between that attorney.
And this is the part where I think I said the acting was superb because his eyes turned dark in that thing, and the look he gives that family law attorney, it's like, oh my God, man!
Crazy.
And you know what? I listened to the interview with the actual family law attorney.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Okay.
you could get that on YouTube.
Wow.
And he says or actually it's on the podcast, I think. He says that at that point, he says, I can't tell you what color eyes the man had.
Mm-hmm.
He said, but I could tell you that at that moment they were black, man.
Oh, man.
And that's what that actor was able to do somehow.
He really
man.
did a
was
great
able
job.
to get that.
Yeah.
So he scares the heck out of the attorney. Starts calling the attorney without
Right.
Debbie knowing and saying, you're fired. I
Right.
want my money back. You
Right.
should have had this done a long time ago and all this other stuff.
Well, he didn't actually. He didn't want the attorney to prepare the postnup. He wanted the attorney to go after the people that were saying stuff about him, which
Yeah.
is not something that family law attorneys do. We work on family law cases. We don't pursue defamation and things like that. That would be a separate type of case.
Right. And you and I know that, what really should have happened is Debbie should have said, look, I'm going to meet with this attorney separately regarding the postnup. You're going to have to go someplace else and talk, and
Right.
we'll have to get that done. It doesn't happen. No postnuptial agreement doesn't happen,
Right.
and we move on, right? So somehow the relationship gets even worse when she starts discovering more and more about what he's doing.
Yeah.
And I think Debbie participates in the tracking of where his movements are because he
Right.
finds out that the daughter did that.
Right.
And she discovers other things about him, right?
Right. And he's basically kind of a complete con artist at this point. She sees him for what he is, but she's so terrified of the things that he's going to do that she kind of just plays along with being in this relationship.
Yeah, and that moment that he gets the letter from the jail, she opens the mail.
Right.
I was thinking about that. She's married to the man.
Sure.
She sees a letter from the Orange County Jail written to him. She opens it, and he comes flying out of the room, and he snatches it out of her hand. He says,
Right.
"That's a felony.
What
How
an
dare you open
interesting,
that?"
what an interesting domestic violence case that is on that specific issue, right?
Yeah.
Is to whether she had the right to open that
That's right.
letter or whether he had the right to read act in that way.
Yeah, so
Right.
you were thinking like I was.
Yeah.
The same thing I thought. I actually don't think it's domestic violence for a spouse to open up mail of the other spouse. I mean, it happens all the time.
Right.
Could you imagine? But, we're in this day and age now where, if you're getting into people's emails and stuff, it could be an invasion of privacy.
Right.
But more so, then he says it's a felony 'cause he's trying to scare her, and it's like the felon telling
Yeah.
her that's a felony, right?
Yeah.
So about that time, she starts, I think, deciding that this thing is over with. And I don't know if it was during that argument or subsequently after that, she moves out for good, right?
Right.
She says she wants a divorce.
I think she finds his stash of kind of like medicine and opiates, right?
Oh, yeah.
'Cause she's kind of hidden in this
because
little
he said
box.
he'd stop. That's right.
He went to
Yeah.
rehab and is
Yeah.
representing to her that he quit cold turkey, right? Which is, number one, virtually impossible to do. It's very, very difficult for people to just automatically just come off of hard opiates, right?
Right.
And he apparently was representing to her that he did it, and she finds out that he didn't, and I think that was ultimately the straw that broke the camel's
Yeah,
back.
let's talk a little bit about that too. Is that when people are coming off of addictions, God bless people that have addictions. I mean, we
So
all have our
hard.
problems, but you just don't get over this from one stint. And in the show, it shows him in a hotel with her or something, and he's cold turkeying,
Right.
and then you get the impression that while she's gone,
Right.
he's doctoring himself up. All of a sudden, he's healthy again, right? But really, what happens is if you have somebody in the family with addictions, you better be ready for a relapse.
It's incredibly difficult.
And ongoing AA meetings
Yep.
and in-house, it's a long struggle in order to get clean again. Our clients that have been successful, have gone into residential programs, and they've been really, really committed. Dirty John didn't look like he was committed.
he was not interested in doing that at all.
So she finds out that, and it's like, okay, now I've had enough, and they divorce. And then his character changes, doesn't it?
Right, he does. And then he goes full kind of aggro on her. He's trying to intimidate her, trying to harass her, stalk her. Both him and her and the members of her family, her 2 daughters and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
the nastiness starts coming up. He starts treating her like he treated everybody else. The facade is gone.
Right.
And he's talking about, I'm going to get everything. You don't know. I don't want to have to break you, but it looks like I'm going to. And he's just being really, really nasty. Now, let me ask you this. He's going through the divorce. Let's assume that they were together about a year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not really sure what the time is, but it's not more than that. I mean, they're a short period of time. She's a 59-year-old woman. She's got 2 adult kids. They're not his kids.
Right.
That business was started long before she ever met Dirty John.
Right.
Her income is there. So what is he likely to get out of this divorce?
Not much. Assuming it goes through a regular divorce case, you're looking at a marriage of very short duration, no children of the marriage. So in terms of what you ultimately are going to walk away with, not very much, but you can make the process very painful. In doing so, right, you can conduct a lot of discovery. You can do a lot of, protracted litigation, frivolous requests for orders. There's a lot of ways to make a relatively simple case.
And we see that.
Yeah,
we see that with
all
people
the time.
doing that.
Yeah.
That's very unfortunate. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because the way I looked at it is let's say that with her earnings, they didn't have a premarital agreement. With her earnings, she bought a car.
Right.
Well, he's entitled to half of the car, right? And by the way, in the show, the car mysteriously gets burned,
That's
by the
right.
way. But, there's some things that he could have, and he might be entitled to like a short period of spousal support.
Right.
Probably not, though, when you look at the fraud that was involved in this case in the duration of the marriage. But he might.
Right.
He might convince a judge to give him like a half a year of spousal support or something.
Well, not if she gets a domestic violence restraining order
That's
against
right.
him, which she definitely should in this type of situation.
Well, let's talk about that in a second, because I might differ with you on that.
Okay.
Okay. But, in this case, where he's threatening her. He's saying, you brought up a wonderful part, is that he can make her life miserable.
Yep.
In spite of the fact that he's not entitled to anything, this is the type of character that's probably going to be dragging her through court, threatening her, telling him what he thinks the law is. And I see a lot of times that people, they want the other side to think that they're the expert on the law.
It's unfortunate because in family law, it's not always about the money. And I think even in this situation, it probably wasn't about the money. It was about the control.
Yeah.
The feeling that he had dominance over her and was able to make her life more difficult.
Yeah.
That's really what he was looking for in this process.
Yeah. And he was really trying to intimidate her by saying that, he knows what the law is and she's going to be very, where the truth is, if she just listened to a family law attorney, look, you're going to be okay.
Exactly.
You're not going to pay very much spousal support, if at all.
Right.
You might not. You're not going to owe him a lot.
How would you handle a case like that in which the other party is just being very obstreperous and being, very
warnings?
difficult? Yep.
I'd send out warning letters to him right away. If he had an attorney, I'd do that and say, any further communications, we're going in to get a restraining order.
Yeah, exactly.
And unlike what a lot of people believe, I do believe that restraining orders are helpful. People could violate them, but in our experience, most of the times they work. They could even result in criminal prosecution.
I think they work on normal, sensible people. I think for types of situations like this, you might need something a little bit more.
Right. Well, going with that, so you think that there could be a restraining order? Tell me why.
Okay, so California law says that if you engage in activity that disturbs the peace and tranquility of a domestic partner or someone in the type of family relationship, that's sufficient. Even where there hasn't been physical abuse. And in this case, there was actually no physical abuse between Debbie and John, but you see a lot of harassing, controlling, intimidation. Tracking her movements, that's something that would be within the scope of the domestic violence prevention.
I mean, it shows that he was kind of following her around and things like that.
That's right.
But you got to prove it, though. It's like the car. The car burned, and they really apparently couldn't prove that he burned it and stuff. So I'm thinking about the evidence. You're thinking about the justification of it and stuff. Yeah,
exactly.
Because I was looking at it, I'm thinking, because she came to me, I wouldn't know for sure if I would go in for a restraining order right away. I'd probably give some warnings and stuff, and then really caution her about her safety.
Okay.
I mean, that's not legal advice. That's just good, really practical advice about her safety. And
you
stuff.
probably would start building up that case, though, as soon as they stepped in the office, right? You ask for all the information, all the background, and I think in these types of cases, it's not going to be one single thing that is going to, ultimately get you that restraining order, but a lot of, small incidents, even things that are just simply circumstantial, like her car kind of mysteriously catching on fire. That might be a part of a bigger case, right, to show that there's, intimidation and destruction of property.
Right. Okay, so then what he does is he's seen following around the daughter, the oldest daughter. Right. Now at this point, Debbie I don't know where she was. I think she went to L.A. on a business or something.
That's right.
And there's one incident in particular where Dirty John was seen following the daughter around, and at that point, the daughter might have grounds for a restraining order.
Yeah, so we didn't talk about that. So long as you're in a family type relationship, that would be within the definition of the law, you can get a restraining order against someone that you might not even have a blood relationship to, like a stepdad or someone who's, dating your mother or someone who's even living in your same household.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I learned is that during most of the time that Dirty John and Debbie were together, the youngest daughter, and I forget their names, and I wish
Tara.
Tara.
She had a great name.
Yeah. She actually was living in Vegas.
Right.
So she had a boyfriend out there. She was in a relationship, and eventually she moved back into Orange County.
Yeah,
but she wasn't. She had some nasty encounters with him or some problems with him, but she wasn't part of the dysfunction for a while. So she moves back into Orange County. And this is where the story gets chilling. Right. I mean, just weird, man.
Exactly.
He's stalking the daughters, man. What the hell is he doing? Does he think that if I take these people out somehow that Debbie's going to come back to me, or am I going to hurt Debbie by hurting the daughters? I mean, what is going on with this guy?
It's hard to kind of understand the logic and the reasoning of someone who's not all mentally together.
Yeah.
Right. Especially if there's someone that is incapable of controlling their actions. There's no justification for it. Even people who are drug addicts, they do really crazy things in order to get more drugs or to feed that addiction. There's no explanation as to why he had to involve
in the
daughters.
podcast. They talk about Dirty John losing like 60 pounds.
Right.
I mean, he was really strung out in drugs. He was probably homeless again.
Right.
Debbie's not propping him up, so he's getting desperate. So the story starts ending with what? Tell me what happened.
So at some point, he decides to take the stalking and the harassment to the next level, and tries to kidnap Tara. While she's walking, from her car, and I think it was to her apartment.
She's going to go on a trip or something like that?
She's going to go on a trip and heading out of town, and she's just kind of packing up some things and getting ready. And all of a sudden, he comes and attacks her.
And he's got a weapon with him.
Yeah, he's got a knife, and he's trying to, I think he was trying to get her into the van, and who knows, God forbid, he actually would be successful in that, but she actually fights back.
Yeah. Right. When he grabs her, he says, "Do you remember me?" And it's like Jason out of some horror story or something like that. I mean, it's as scary as hell. And this poor little kid, man, is going to go to some country western concert with her friends, and all of a sudden this smelly, drug addict guy, man, that's desperate says, "Remember me?" And he's got a knife in his hand.
Right.
Now, thank God Tara had mentally prepared for this. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so Tara is actually a zombie enthusiast and was a follower of, I think, the Walking Dead series.
I don't get you
TV.
Kids, man. What are you talking, zombie enthusiast?
Well, the world's going to end at some point, so it's best to be prepared, and Tara was prepared in this situation. She knew, which is absolutely crazy, because I think this is a 5-foot kind of $100-pound girl fighting off, this guy that's apparently built like a football player.
Yeah, and you could see that he was a big dude, man.
He's a huge guy, yeah. So she knew what to do, and ultimately fighting for her life, she was able to kind of escape that situation. And unfortunately, I guess fortunately, John wasn't as lucky as her. I think his luck had probably run out at that point.
Okay, so let's talk about this physical encounter. You know that I love mixed martial arts. I watch it. I don't participate in it. I'm too old for that. But I love watching it and stuff. And I was fascinated by this story because what happens is John brings his own knife there, right? And he's got it, and I think he tries to start stabbing her, but she won't go with the program, right? And what happens is he loses the knife, and Tara grabs it, right? And then she's able to block him with her legs. She's on her back, and that's the worst situation you could be in. But she's fighting for her life.
Exactly.
And mentally, she had already prepared for this. And what she does is she takes that knife, and the podcast is better than the movie in putting a chill up your back, because it talks about Matt Murphy starts in there, and he starts talking about the stabs.
Right.
And it's 1, 2, 3, throughout the body, and then the last one is where?
In the eye.
Right through the eye. I mean, oh my God, that was the one that killed the guy,
and
man.
That's the one that's straight out of the zombie apocalypse, too.
I don't even, I'm a former police officer, I'm a former wrestler and stuff like that, and I'm thinking, how was she able to do that?
She's a regular teenage girl being put into that situation.
Yeah, and you listen to the interviews of her on YouTube and various talk shows. I mean, she speaks with a little lisp. I mean, she's just a little cute, girl and stuff like that. And it's just a miracle, man.
You can never count. You can never count anybody out, right? In that type of situation where they have to fight for their life.
Well, the thing that I'd like to emphasize here is for victims of domestic violence, and women mostly, they're always told either number one is fight back, or some people say run away and stuff, or if it's a sexual assault type of a case, don't fight the suspect. You used to hear that a lot. I think that nowadays we know that women could fight.
Yeah.
Okay. High school teams have wrestlers, female wrestlers, either collegiate wrestlers, Olympic wrestlers. If you turn on the tube, you'll see that there's female fighters in the mixed martial artists, and they're damn good.
Yeah,
they're the type of women that I wouldn't want to get into a scrap with, man. They'd probably choke me out or knock me out or something like that. Women can fight.
Right.
And what women need to do is learn how to fight, learn how to defend yourself.
Get out of that situation.
Yeah, Tara, I hope that you're an inspiration to a lot of people, because that was an amazing thing, and my daughters and any woman that I know, I think that you need to follow that and understand that you could get out of these situations by fighting back.
Absolutely.
Just because somebody's bigger than you doesn't mean that they're smarter or more athletic or equipped to take you on and stuff.
That kind of goes into the family law realm too. If you're in a position where you're being abused or harassed, you don't have to sit there and take it.
That's right.
You don't have to just assume that this is just the way it's going to be. You have to fight back. You have to do what you need to do to get out of that situation.
Absolutely.
And we help people like that every single day.
Yeah. Cool. Well, the show kind of ends, with a scene in the hospital. What we learn is Dirty John's sister comes by and meets Debbie and her daughters, and the sister takes whose side in this?
I believe she takes their side, right?
Yeah.
They take their side.
Yeah, because she knew what a bad guy this was, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It's kind of crazy to see all these people who know the type of person. I mean, even the people who were giving speeches at his wedding were telling the bride to watch out for this guy, and Debbie was just willing to kind of disregard all of that until she saw for herself what this type of person really was. Yeah.
So the divorce proceedings were going forward. I don't think they were ever divorced.
I don't think they finished, no.
What happens when somebody dies during a divorce?
The case gets dismissed because, there's no more divorce that needs to be entered. You're automatically, by virtue of the death, and returned to the status of a single person.
Yeah. It was kind of interesting in the... I think it was in the TV show. Debbie goes back to his secret trailer that's out somewhere in Riverside, somewhere, part of the desert and stuff. She starts looking around and seeing things for the first time, learning about who she really was married to.
Right.
And it just brings us to full circle about being careful, with people, and stuff. You meet people online very easily these days. It's very easy and convenient to get into a relationship where you're enabling somebody or something like that. And we hope, I hope that this whole story really is a lesson for people that want to be in meaningful, healthy relationships and not get hurt in the process.
If you're getting, repeated warnings from your family and friends who are close to you and people that love you and are genuinely concerned about your well-being, it might be worth taking some of that advice.
It's funny that you say that. I mean, in the old days, it's like, well, it's not my place. I shouldn't say anything, and it's like that meddling mother-in-law or sister or something like that. There may be some truth to that, but a lot of times people are just saying that because they love you and they're seeing things that you're not.
Yeah, those that will love you the most are the ones that are willing to kind of, let you know what they think, even though that might not be what you want to hear.
Yeah. Okay. So. Well, young man, you did it again. You scored 10 out of 10, man. You're awesome.
back on the Netflix kick. Right?
Okay.
Yeah,
okay. So. Well, thank you again for being here. We'll have to look for the next one to do. And thank you for being on Exhibit A. And
thank
until
you very
next
much.
time. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye now.